let's shift the conversation away from the machines for a moment to you as the driver. So, what steps do you take to mentally prepare before a race and kind of get yourself ready?
Well, I've been doing this for a long time. I think this is I've done 35 seasons in a row now. So I don't, it doesn't take any mental prep for me. The day of or even the hour of. I'm always doing interviews. I'm doing pictures of people, letting little kids sit in the car, talking to folks. My family is there, or other friends. And, I'm like literally up until the time where they say, you got 5 minutes to go, and I have to start putting my helmet on. I'm busy chatting with folks. Um, the mental preparation prior to that, it depends on whether I've raced that track before or not. If I haven't, I'll try and drive it on a simulator if possible. If I have, but it's again like the big Formula One weekends with the professional guys, I'll do some sim time as well. I try to drive laps in my head and I actually time them. I'll click the timer, close my eyes, drive the lap, and see if I can come very close to what my lap time would be. And if I can visualize it, then I've got the right rhythm, sequence, and breaking points and all that in my head. So that when I hit the track, I'm usually, for me, I just, maybe it's my engineering background or something. I learn new tracks very quickly and I get up to speed very quickly. I'm often in the top one, two, three on the very first practice session.
That visualization, Bud, is really fascinating for me because I studied baseball hitters for a while because I was trying to compare them to landing an airplane on an aircraft carrier, and the best hitters and the best pilots always would do that visualization thing, and it's almost like you were warming up your brain, the synapses in your brain that are going to fire during the real thing. And I'm interested to hear that you did that.
The benefit to me is if I have a corner that I feel I'm not quite doing correctly, or I feel like there's more speed in it, but I'm kind of stuck in this rut because I've got the rhythm already in my mind, I'll dream it differently. I'll visualize it differently before I'm going to bed. And I'll imagine, carrying an extra couple hundred RPM, braking, an extra 50 feet later or something like that, just to see if I can get that slightly different pattern in my head and then try it the next day. But it's very physical. The G forces are no joke. The mental processing speed requirements, no joke, all that sort of stuff. But the mental side of it is absolutely huge. You look at these guys that are out there driving, and you think like NASCAR cars or something, and you're like, man, they're just a bunch of hicks. They're just driving around in circles. Well, there's a whole lot to that sport. And there've been guys that have left IndyCar and gone to NASCAR and done terribly. Yeah, so it's just got to do with their discipline and their particular experience.
So speaking of IndyCar, we had a really good conversation with Joseph Newgarden.
Oh yeah,
And
he's a great guy.
yeah, and he reflected on how his approach to risk management has changed over the course of his career. And so I'm interested in your thoughts on that. How do you balance the fearlessness required to race at high speed, inches away from other cars, with the risk management required to do it safely, realizing that if you bang out of a race, it's your money, your team, the whole thing, and potentially your own health. How do you balance those two things?
Yeah, and I didn't get to see the Joseph interview, but he's married with, I think he's got a kid now. So that changes your mindset. Having a mortgage changes your mindset.
He talked about that.
To go
Yes.
work and, pay a mortgage and that sort of thing. And you'll see a lot of drivers will often slow down when they get married or when they have these additional responsibilities. And it's natural. I think it's absolutely natural. For me, I'm a little weird. Well, one, I've been doing this a long time, but I don't have fear. It's a weird thing. I don't know if fear is it's innate in humans, but it may be something genetic because we're patterned as humans to be afraid of only two things: falling and loud noises. And I'll be in a restaurant or something, and some server will drop a giant, tray of glasses, and everybody in the restaurant will jump. And I'm just like, yeah, okay, I know what happened. Drop glass, big deal.
Somebody dropped their watch. Yeah. Okay.
So that lack of fear, that lack of that fear response, I think has allowed me to stay in the cerebral zone and be thinking more about analytically, you know, braking markers. Where am I hitting the accelerator? How much speed can I carry through here? And if I have a oops, or the rear starts to slide or the front starts to slide, or I make some kind of mistake, or there's a bump that I finally got onto because I was in a slow part of the track. It's just like, well, that's like AI, right? It goes into machine learning and you just deal with it. And the kind of fear thing is it just doesn't compute with me. Doesn't happen.
But you mentioned though that you had a couple close calls and I'm basically what sounds like some pretty serious crashes. So did that not affect how you approached the race at all?
No, it's like they say about, having to get back up on the horse after you get kicked off. So that very first big crash that I had, the first suspension failure, I was only 2 years into racing, and I was at a practice event. I leased a car for the day, practiced, it failed, went into the wall, car was completely destroyed. I mean, tweaked the chassis, the body was disintegrated. I I don't think I passed out. It was like somebody turned the dimmer down really low and then it came back up. Um,
It's like, what just happened?
I pushed the fire button. I got myself out of the car, got checked out by the paramedic guys, but I was a mess. I had broken a couple of things and I was a total mess, but I was 2.5 hours from home. So I got in my car, went 7-Eleven, bought 4 or 5 bags of ice, packed them around me, and drove home. Well, I drove to the swimming pool because that's where my family was. It was 4th of July weekend, I think. And I hobbled out of the car, and my daughter saw me and came running over and gave me this big, crushing hug, which
Hurt.
hurt my broken ribs. And I just said, "Hey, get mom for me." And I just told her what had happened, and you know, drove home and went to the doctor. And I think about 6 or 7 weeks later, I was cleared to race. I went back to the same track in the same kind of car. And on that very first practice session, as I was going through that area where the suspension failed, I mentally started to lift my foot. And I'm like, if you're going to do that, get out of the car right now, give up racing, because if you're going to let every little thing like this, it's a little, um, you know, turn into a slowdown, then you're not made for this sport. So I put my foot down, even though I was still in some amount of pain. I qualified first and won the race that weekend and never looked back.
Huh.
Wow.
So
How cool is
I
that?
think one of these other things, that other big crash, I literally shattered my neck. But
Yeah, you
yeah,
mentioned.
not only having no fear, I have very little pain. So I actually raced the rest of the season. And at the end of the season, I was saying to my wife, my neck's still a little bit sore. And she said, if you say something's sore, we're going to the doctor. So went in, MRI. Surgeon said, it's a good thing you came in because your neck is in a million pieces. If you had just tripped on the way into my office, you could be paralyzed for life.
No way.
And
Yeah.
my wife said, well, he raced the rest of the season. I'm like, shh.
Yeah.
Well, but yeah, I mean, sounds like your neck and your head are pretty confined in the car, so that's probably the safest place to be if tripping was going to discombobulate your whole neck.
Yeah. So
Oh
we
my
did
gosh.
we did neck surgery with, plates and screws and cadaver bone and all that stuff. 6 months later, was cleared to race. I got into the 2003 car, went to New Orleans Motorsports Park, where I'd never been before. The Indy cars had been there in April, and Juan Pablo Montoya qualified at a 121. I'd never been there before. It was incredibly bumpy, so bumpy that in braking zones, we have these numbers that we see that are markers for where we should brake. The car was vibrating so badly and shaking my eyes so hard, I could not read the numbers. Until it was a 5 or 4 or whatever. So crazy. Anyway, I ended up breaking the track record that weekend by 3 seconds
Hmm.
faster than
Wow.
in the Indy
That's
cars.
amazing.
So again, just sort of like, here's another disaster, come back, get on the horse and ride it hard.